Welcome to the Analytics Excellence webinar series sponsored by Black Hills IP and the SLW Institute. Today we'll be covering the subject of using patent portfolio and filing trend analytics to help guide patent portfolio development, presented by Tom Marlow. Tom?
Hi. Thanks, gals. I'm Tom Marlow, currently president of Black Hills IP Renewals. Formerly, I was director of IP at Fairchild Semiconductor, managing our global IP operations, and also after that, co-chair of the Patent Portfolio Management and Analytics Group with Schweigman Company. So we're going to take a look at analytics to drive portfolio development, and there's two ways that we can look at these analytics. One is internal, analyzing your portfolio to drive development, filing, and prosecution decisions, and then external, where we're talking about analyzing competitor or landscape portfolios to do the same. So starting out with internal analysis, the primary goal that can be attained through this analysis is really improved alignment with business, strategy, and operation. Internal data is used here, so that's review and analysis of the patent portfolio and corporate business data. So business alignment is a key piece of this. The first part of any portfolio management operation really rests in knowing what you have. Once you get past a few dozen patents in a portfolio, mapping, categorizing those patents really becomes necessary to be able to take a step back and make a sense of it all as a whole. So first and foremost, my recommendation, what I usually do is map the patents into relevant technologies. This is going to be helpful in determining product mappings if you don't already have those, and then will also be helpful in tying patents to competitor products. It's much easier to map a technology to a competitor product than to take a look at each patent individually, and we'll get a little bit into that competitor side of things in a moment. Ideally, every invention submission that gets processed is tagged with an originating or applicable product line and just genericized technology, which might be broader than the product that it's being developed out of. However you go about the mapping and categorization process, these are really the two areas worth focusing on: product ties and technology ties. Once you've got a portfolio mapped, then the analytics of alignment with the business data of the corporation really come into play. The first one we'll take a look at is technology and technology categorizations and R&D spend. So if you take R&D spend, historical data, and forward-looking projections, these can be overlaid with a patent portfolio filing trends and forward-looking projections. Taking those spend numbers, taking your filing numbers, and putting them next to each other to see what they look like. I really recommend offsetting filing trend data by 3 to as much as 6 months in order to get the right overlay. And the reason for that is a non-provisional original application may not actually get filed for 1 to 2, sometimes more months from when the invention disclosure is given to outside counsel. On top of that, an invention disclosure itself can take 30 to 45 days to even get reviewed and improved internally, sometimes more if patent committees meet less frequently. And finally, an inventor might sit on his or her invention for weeks or months before formalizing it into an invention submission. And of course, this can be driven by a lot of things: workload. Those inventors have other things to do, the want or need to add more or make it perfect, or uncertainty as to the novelty, just to name a few. So the key is that within any company, you're going to want to play with the data to see what offset fits your submission, review, and filing procedures to get that R&D spend time frame to line up with the patent filing trends that are associated with that spend. And then we'll see R&D spend is on the leftmost vertical axis of this first chart. And filing count is on the right vertical axis. You'll want to play with that right vertical axis scale a bit to get to figure out what that needs to be to align the appropriate R&D spend to what you would expect the appropriate number of filings to be. Once you get that alignment done once, then that allows you to apply that data historically and looking forward. What we can take out of this particular graph, taking a look at, say, 2015, 2016 data, is that there are some technology segments that are a little bit out of alignment. We see the green one, and I should say in each of these double bars, the bar for each of the color groups for the technologies, the bar to the left is R&D spend, the bar to the right is filings. So we can see Tech A and Tech B have historically been a little out of alignment. Tech C looks pretty good. And that historical data and getting our appropriate scale for the filings on the rightmost axis allows us to take the projected R&D spend for the three technology areas for 2017 and determine what would be an appropriate filing rate within those different technology areas. So the R&D projections can help drive what kind of filings you would want to try and strive for internally. The next chart, so the chart on the right, we're taking a look at cumulative data. So rather than looking at it over time, we'll take a block of time and accumulate the R&D spend and accumulate, instead of filings, we'll take a look at the total matters to see if we've got good coverage based on how much value and how much cash has been put into a particular technology. And where there's misalignment, those might be areas to try and mine for additional protections if that makes sense from a business perspective. These graphs focus on R&D spend and technology categories. You can graph similarly using the same axes, but swapping out R&D spend with product sales data and swapping out the technologies A, B, and C with products A, product B, product C as they're mapped to the patents in your portfolio, and strive to match the patent filings related to different product groups with essentially the value of those products and the product sale numbers. And those can by using those projections in line with the R&D projections, you should get a good idea for what your forward-looking patent portfolio should look like in order to align that portfolio development with your business strategy. So in addition to the mapping and growth over time, geography also comes into play. So patent portfolio is not always just about numbers, but it's also about where you're filing. International strategies, they're expensive, so it's important to get them right, or at least make sure that there's something giving them logical direction and providing some sort of a feedback check to see if things are getting covered the way that you want them to. The analysis here is not terribly complex. Essentially, you want to identify markets for products, so sales markets, and the size of those markets, and overlay filings that are mapped to those products in those countries. So if I've got my filings in the US and I've got my filings in China and I've got my filings in Japan, I can overlay those with sales in those various markets to see if there's a good correlation. Additionally, sometimes the patent coverage is going to look a little overbroad in certain jurisdictions based on the sales numbers. So there's another variable that comes into play, and that's taking a look at your competitor manufacturing sites. So for products and technology, if you can get that level of data based on your competitors' manufacturing sites, but then to be able to overlay those manufacturing sites, jurisdictions where those exist, with your patent portfolio as well. And if you can get the breakdown by technology or product groups, that makes the data even that much more useful. And the goal here with respect to the manufacturing sites is to ensure that competitor locations are covered in line with the business strategy and with respect to the to those particular competitors and products. And now we're taking a look at more of a highly defensive play in that respect. With this, say, worldview incorporating sales and competitor manufacturing, you should have an international patent portfolio development and maintenance strategy pretty well framed up. So with this simple chart that we're looking at on this slide, we can take a look at what does my patent coverage look like. In this case, I've in two various colored bars, we've got two, we'll say they're two different technology areas. And then what do my sales in that jurisdiction look like, and what does my competitor manufacturing look like? In the bars, the size of the bars are related to the competitive revenue related to that manufacturing, so we can see what the impact or value of the manufacturing in that location would be. The idea being to align, to find a correlation between your patent coverage and some sort of a combination of the sales and manufacturing data that are on this chart. And where there are disparities, that'll show areas where you need development or where the patent portfolio might be developed overbroad, and you can apply that to, say, an annuity management strategy. There might be fertile ground for saving some money on annuities for those particular matters. The next piece of internal analysis that you can do is related to time. So if we take a look at the patent portfolio as a whole, or if it's large enough, breaking it out into technology or product-based segments, we can take a look at aging of that portfolio. So how many patents in my portfolio are 20 years old? How many are 19? How many are, just in their infancy, and so on. The peaks and valleys in a remaining life chart like this are going to be where I want to focus my concerns, because when one of those peaks hits expiration time, it's going to result in a drastic reduction of coverage in the portfolio. So in this particular chart, I can see I have a large peak, say, at patents that are about, let's say, 15 years old. Well, that means in about 5 years, I'm going to lose a decent chunk of that portfolio to expiration. And what is that going to mean for the protection that those patents are providing to my company? What does that mean to the products or technologies that they're applied to? Is that acceptable if this is just a legacy technology line, or if this is something where sales are still driving growth? Is that something to be worried about? The idea being, well, if we have peaks that are more to the left, meaning they are coming to expiration sooner, I've got a lot more concerns to deal with. They're harder to deal with than those on the right, which are my more recently filed cases. And so when I have a situation like this, if there is a concern, the way to deal with it is taking a look at the portfolio and seeing if there's things that can be done from a continuation practice perspective. So are there, in some of my older pending matters, additional inventions that can be rolled out with value using continuations or divisionals? Or if all else fails, acquisitions can help level out the curve where there might be some gaps. So next, we'll switch things around a little bit and take a look externally. The primary goal really that can be attained through external analysis is insight in how to develop a patent portfolio that has significance to competitors and, well, the market in general. When we say external analysis data being used, we're talking about review and analysis of competitor patent portfolios and technology landscapes, and using views of that data to improve an internal patent portfolio. So first thing we're going to take a look at are trends with respect to competitors or a landscape. Technology, filing, and issuance trends over time, and abandonment trends, if you can get that data, are useful to signify development trends from a customer or from a market. This data can help determine whether new portfolio developments will be moving into, say, growing thickets of IP, or maybe tapering pastures or white spaces. They can also help numerically determine relative portfolio strengths. Strength is kind of a loaded word, since numbers really only get you so far, in my opinion. This data can help also determine whether it's feasible to organically develop a competitive portfolio in a particular technology segment, or whether there are acquisition targets or licensing partners that can help bridge that gap where the organic growth is going to be much more difficult. Anecdotally here, I was involved in a development project some years ago. I can't go into the details, so I'm going to speak to it in generic terms. We were beginning to develop we'll call it a widget, a new widget. How about a flying widget in this case? We had the widget tech, we had the widget IP, but it was that flight IP that we needed to develop. As part of this development process, we performed extensive landscape analysis with the goal of determining where there's white space in this area for development or potentially staking a claim. We didn't want to run into competitors' patents, and that was what the analysis was driving. Well, during that analysis, we found that there was a major player in the technology space with a significant IP position. And incidentally, that player wasn't one that we would be directly competing with. They used the technology in a different market segment. So this analysis then kind of opened the door, because we were looking at developing this IP and how much effort and how much R&D spend it would take to do that. And by seeing that there's this potential player out there with the IP already developed, it opened the door to licensing and even acquisition discussions, which allowed us to accelerate development and product launch timing. So the landscape analysis that you do with respect to these markets can be really useful in developing the portfolio. And in this case, an acquisition or even a license would give access to IP where it would take much longer to organically grow. So understanding competitor or landscape geographic coverage is also useful. That's the second piece on here, where we talk about external geography, because it helps us understand where competitors value their protection. It's where they're staking claims, where they're spending money, and where there are gaps geographically. These might be fertile grounds for staking additional claims too, especially if there are emerging growth markets that you're looking at. Now, under the maybe not so useful category that I have on this slide, I want to talk briefly about timing. Timing's a tricky trend to capture. The goal behind it being trying to ascertain product or technology development cycle patterns. What makes it tricky, aside from what we're all familiar with, the 18-month lag from filing to publication that puts you behind the 8 ball immediately. The tricky part is that the timing of the filings themselves can be influenced by a number of other variables. As I discussed earlier, there's an additional lag between technology development and patent filing. Non-provisional application taking 30 to 60 or more days from when the attorney receives it. If a provisional is used, that might happen quicker. So if you're looking over a portfolio, provisional priority should be taken into consideration when looking at timing to drive trends. And then, of course, there's all the internal processes that take time, the invention review, how inventors put their invention disclosures together, and these things vary widely from company to company. The bottom line is really timing trends can be tricky. I wouldn't spend much time on them unless you've got an abundance of resources. The next thing to look at from a competitor analytics perspective, one that I really like is family data. Family data is particularly interesting because each one of those family members has got a dollar figure next to it. So every filing is money, and that generally is a good signifier of value. And then when we're taking a look at families, there's two ways to look at them. In-country filings, what I'm going to call vertical data. So that's your continuations, your divisional chains, and international spread, and what I might call horizontal data around a family. So if you take a competitor's portfolio or technology landscape and sort it by family size, this is a quick way to get an idea of key technologies and then where they might have more value. So if I'm looking at a patent portfolio that's got 26 family members and I see vertical filings, so multiple filings in the US and multiple filings, say, in South Korea, that tells me something. That tells me, one, this is a key technology because of the sheer number of patents filed and the money that was probably spent on it. And then I can see, based on the continuation practice, where there are, which jurisdictions might have more or less value within that valuable technology. There's two other data points that potentially have value. Longevity, the first one that I'll talk about. Longevity is interesting because if used correctly, it can tell you if somebody is spending more money, and spend generally signifies value. Because most of the time annuities are going to be due, annuities, renewals, maintenance fees on these patents, and the longer they're alive, the more they cost. The tricky part is that not every company is fully on top of their annuity management. So longevity really depends on that competitor's annuity management practices. If they are active and they're strategic, and they're culling their portfolio and keeping the good stuff and letting the less useful stuff go, longevity data becomes very useful and is well indicative of value-based spend. If they aren't very active from a maintenance perspective, then it's not going to tell you much. One way to find out if that's going to be useful data is to take a look at a competitor's abandonment practices, and if they are actively abandoning some matters within the portfolio year to year, then you can probably get some good data out of the longevity numbers and figure out which patents are going to be more valuable within the portfolio. The other item that I have here is inventors. Inventor data can be interesting. One way to look at it is to look at key inventors. So those that appear over multiple patents, inventors that are higher profile within a company, those that are published heavily. Key inventors can signify important IP, but it's worth noting that there may also be internal mechanisms driving to push inventions from key inventors, perhaps through with a lower threshold. And meaning, when a key inventor is on an invention disclosure within a company, it can happen that those things get pushed through to filing more easily than other invention disclosures that come within the company. So what you might have are more filings on that key inventor that may actually be of less value than the average patent filing within the portfolio. And this is going to be especially true as these key inventors have more, say, political weight within the company. So it's kind of one of those things to bear in mind as you're taking a look at key inventor patents or data on a portfolio. Basically, that data can be a little inconsistent sometimes. On the other hand, one way that I've found is useful with respect to inventors is to sort patents in a particular portfolio by inventor count. Inventor count can provide some interesting results. Generally, patent filings with numerous inventors represent development projects, and a lot of times key development projects. This happens all the time. There's a big development that's underway, and an IP review or brainstorm is scheduled near the end of that development project to gather the ideas for protection. It's not uncommon for groups of inventions, groups of inventors to appear in single applications, especially the early ones in a continuation chain. And then back to the families, a lot of times these do end up resulting in large families because as the continuations are kind of iterated out. So once you have some of that data as to the important or key patents within a technology space or within a competitor portfolio, that's interesting. It's good to know what they are, but what can you do with it? And there's two courses of action that I'm going to talk about here. One is to pull those patents, pull some of those key patents, and take a look at key terminology. Take that key terminology and replicate it in alternative embodiments of filings that are going to be going out. So if you've got an invention in a related space, in a related area, to a competitor's, some of a competitor's key IP, finding the keywords, finding the key terminology that competitor uses, and while that's not going to be the focus of your application, making sure, as makes sense, to try and use some of that terminology in alternative embodiments. Additionally, using the identification of key technologies to drive discussion topics during invention review, IP brainstorming sessions, basically saying, how can our technology, how can what we're developing be applied to our competitors' techniques, or this key technology that our competitors, or the key technology that's being used in the market. Knowing how a competitor technology works, how can we apply our newly invented ideas in a way that would intersect their potential development roadmap, and making sure to include that either as alternative embodiments, additional inventions, or dependent claims. That should be a part of the analysis. Remember, patents are outward facing. The focus isn't all about how an internal particular product embodies the invention, but it almost should be as much so how a competitor product could or would embody the invention. Patents are rights that prevent others from practicing your inventions. So it's a good idea to consider how they will be used by others, specifically those competitors in your development process. So these analytic examples are meant to expose, say, the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of data out there in and around IP, and the key is always what question are you trying to answer, and then determining how to use the data to answer it. It's really easy to get overrun with data preceding the questions. So I hope these examples are helpful in providing ways to answer some of the business and IP questions that that you may run into. And with that, I'll open up to some questions. Okay, so I've got a question here, which says, what tools are you using for all the analysis and data mining and the visualizations and pivot tables? In this case, on my slides, I've used a few different tools. One is a tool called Patent Buddy that I like to use to pull portfolios together and really dig into them. And in some cases, the data that I'm trying to pull is nuanced enough that you just have to export the data and run it manually. So it's a combination of using, in my case, I use Patent Buddy plus a kind of a manual Excel-based analysis of the data. All right. Any other questions? All right, with that, I will, I'll go ahead and end this. Our next analytics webinar is coming up on May 3rd. Looks like it's patent landscaping analytics and comparative patent owner analytics. So I hope to see you all there. And please contact us if you have any other questions with regard to any of these topics. Thanks.